Welcome back, Asshole Survivors. Let's pick up where we left off. Last time, we talked about how to identify assholes among people we interact with on a daily basis. This time, we are going to see why it's important to be aware of assholes around you. Let's take a look at the list of damages that can be done by assholes, especially at workplace. Workplace assholes can make you lose trust, motivation, innovation, willingness to make suggestions, and the list goes on and on. Do you really want to suffer these damages? Of course not. That's the main reason why you should be aware of assholes. Sometimes people don't realize that assholes have been causing damages on them the whole time. And by the time they find out, it may be too late. Because damages have been building up, becoming too big for them to handle. Before you find out if you have been suffering damages, you first need to identify if this or that person is an asshole. Let's talk about asshole boss at the workplace I mentioned from the previous video. Well, this is boss and this is me. When I asked him the question, what it did to me was to talk back to me. And his talk was the thing that I could use to tell if my boss is an asshole. So from the previous video, my boss yelled at me and saying I was so stupid. The talk from my boss contained the keyword stupid. The word stupid is used to disrespect someone. So I can tell right away that this talk is a sign of disrespect. Let's go back and take a look at diagnostic signs from the talks and acts. I was disrespected by my boss. So at this point, I can tell that my boss is an asshole. Once I realize that my boss is an asshole, the next step is to identify the damages that my asshole boss has done to me. Let's go back to the beginning of the story. My boss gave me an assignment. I asked him for an instruction. My purpose of asking this question was to know how to perform the job correctly. But what happened after he yelled at me? My question wasn't answered. Meaning what? My purpose wasn't fulfilled. What were the consequences? I might not perform the job correctly. The first person who suffered was myself. I might have bad reputation. the company could also suffer the damages. When the job wasn't done, the company lost productivity. The boss himself could also suffer the damages. Since he was my supervisor, he was also responsible for how I perform my job. When I didn't perform my job well, he could be seen as a failed leader. As you can see, when assholes have done terrible things on you, those who suffer damages are not only you and people around you. Let's go back to the keyword stupid. So, does anybody want to be disrespected? Of course not. If I ask him the question, I am likely to be called stupid again. I don't want to be disrespected again. Am I going to ask him a question again in the future? Not likely. Demotivation. Particularly the motivation to ask questions. And what can happen if I don't ask questions when I don't know how to do the jobs? I do not know how to do the jobs in the future. And damages carry on. What happens next? Damages on myself, the company, and the boss. Continue. So let's summarize. The problem begins with my boss is an asshole. His asshole behaviors caused me an ability to do the job. Unwillingness to ask questions in the future. My inability to do the job sabotage the company, myself, and my boss. Perhaps he became bigger asshole because he was sabotaged. And this goes back to stage number 1. And this whole thing becomes a vicious cycle. And yeah, that's about it for this video. The story about my asshole boss should be a case study of why you should be aware of assholes. Hopefully, this will help raising your awareness, so you find ways to at least reduce damages, if not able to avoid entirely. And in the next and last video about assholes, I'm going to talk about ways that you can do to avoid or at least suppress damages from assholes. See you again real soon. Stay safe and don't be an asshole.